is a typical village in Davao Province in southeastern Mindanao, the second largest of the Philippine Islands, and the heart of the region which produces the best of the world's supply of Manila hemp, or more correctly, abacá fiber. The friendly, carefree people who inhabit this lush equatorial land are indeed very important persons. Their labor and skills are primary requisites in growing and processing the strongest, most durable, and resilient of natural rope-making fibers, Manila hemp. The carabao, or water buffalo, the island chain's universal beast of burden, is an important animal in the production of abacá fiber. On Mindanao, where the Colombian Rope Company of the Philippines pioneered an establishment of abacá procurement and shipping facilities in the island area producing the finest of the fiber, the carabao is the common workhorse of the fields, marshlands, and jungle. The animal derives its sustenance from the undergrowth everywhere at hand, and its grazing companion often is a snowy white bird, the egret, which perches on the carabao's back as the powerful beast moves through the heavy greenery. Here and elsewhere throughout the islands, the carabao relieves the farmers of much of the back-breaking labor involved in clearing jungle for new growing areas, in plowing the fields in which are grown his food crops, and in carrying on the endless cultivation necessary in this nearly incredible, fertile region, where wild vegetation must be held in check with main strength. These plodding, seemingly docile animals actually are endowed with uncertain tempers, which are affected by the humid heat. They must be permitted to wallow undisturbed in water holes or streams several times a day to keep them tractable. Here, a section of jungle forest is being cleared for use as a new abacá plantation. An ally of the workers engaged in this task is the climate itself. Sun and humidity will combine to quickly rot the stumps and litter left by the clearing crews. It is unnecessary to clear the ground as thoroughly as must be done in more temperate climates. Since the stump of this great tree will be burned or left to rot away, the workers improvise a platform, like the one on which this man is working, to enable them to make their felling cut above the formidable thickness of the tree at ground level. Most of the trees in these forests are of softwood varieties which have no commercial value. For this reason, no effort is made to remove more of them than is necessary. When this tree, which has reached to dizzy heights above the jungle floor to seek out the life-giving sun, finally is brought down, fire and rot will speed the return of its elements to the earth which nurtured it. To people in the United States, where nearly all trees have some value, this method of disposing of the forest might seem a reckless waste of natural resources. But remember, the jungle abundantly provides more materials than the Filipino people need for homes and other uses. After the fallen trees and brush have been tinder-dried by the blazing equatorial sun, the burning off will begin. As the workers touch off the litter with their torches, natural oils and resins in the dried trees and brush add to the intenseness of the leaping fire. This method of clearing land with blade and flame probably is as old as that dim era of civilization's development when man first usurped a piece of primeval land to try his hand at agriculture. Here in the tropics, even after this ruthless cutting and burning off, the jungle quickly would overrun this land again if it were not kept cultivated and cleared of the relentless encroachments of the swift-growing plant life. This life will be ready to spring from the earth again as soon as it is cool. Thus, the fertility of the tropics both blesses and plagues the effort of those who seek to use its growing magic. We now come to the point in our story where we are to show how Manila fiber actually is grown and cultivated. These bulbs, or crowns, from which the new growth will be produced, are made up of fully developed rootstock stripped from older plantings. The shoots from these bulbs grow just as those which come from the eyes of seed potatoes we plant in this country, and the selection of abacá and potato seed stock is similarly determined. The man and boy are marking out the abacá planting rows with the aid of a locally made section of Manila fiber rope. To a farmer or gardener in this country, such roughly cleared, unplowed ground would hardly seem ready for planting. But remember again, this scene is in the tropics, where the rubbish littering the ground represents just so much future fertilizer. The farmers set out the abacá roots in rows 10 to 12 feet apart, Abaca, by the way, is a perennial plant which will yield limited cuttings of fiber-bearing stalks in about 18 months and full production harvest in 36 months. Properly cared for stands of this banana family plant commonly have a life of from 25 to 30 years. The actual planting of the abaca rootstock is a simple chore. Using his always handy bolo, the farmer scoops out a shallow hole in the rich, crumbly ground, sets in the bulb, and packs the earth around and upon it. Once the rows are all laid out and planted, nature will take over, and it's only a matter of waiting for the new growth to develop. The bolo employed by the farmers for clearing and planting the ground is the most commonly used tool for many purposes in the island. This practical, versatile piece of equipment also doubles as a dreaded weapon, without which no Filipino fighting man would enter battle. As weeks and months slip by, the new plants grow and flourish swiftly under the benevolent warmth of the sun. Because of the wide spacing between the rows, field crops such as corn are planted in rows of their own between the stands of abaca and are cultivated right along with the fiber plants. The fight against the choking weeds and vines which all but leap out of the rich soil never ends. While the tractors are used for much of this work on larger plantations, a group of close-working farmers also works diligently to keep the jungle from overwhelming the abaca planting. This abaca grove was planted from 12 to 15 months ago. With harvest time still some time removed, these men will spend much of their time at this cultivating task until it is time to cut out the first mature stalks. Preparing lunch on an abaca plantation is an easy matter. The farmers are used to making a meal of whatever food is at hand. This crew of field workers is lunching on corn, which was picked from the cover crop growing between the rows of abaca. At last it is time for the first harvest, and here a bolo-swinging worker is cutting out a fully matured stalk. One of the growing characteristics of the abaca plant is that only one stem of a single planting or hill matures at one time. The fully grown stalks are identified by the flower and ripened fruit on their tops. Once the flower and fruit-bearing stalks are selected and cut down in an operation called tumbling, the tops and bottoms are lopped off and discarded as waste. This may appear to be done with little care, but the expert worker makes sure that he cuts away none of the stalk holding the prime fiber. Now comes the operation called tuxieing, or the stripping off of the sheath-like layers of pulp-filled fiber which form the stalk. This task calls for skill and dexterity gained only through long practice. Watch how this worker will use even his feet to hold the stalk in the proper position as he works expertly with his razor-edged bolo and knife. Care again must be taken in this stripping off of the layers to avoid cutting into others closer to the center of the stalk. Each ribbon, or tuxie as they are called, of the stalk layers contains a comparatively small number of the prized fibers. The remainder, as we shall see as the processing continues, is all waste. The fiber in the successive concentric layers of the stalk structure is of varying grades and coarseness. From the outer layers come the darker or streaky but toughest grades of fiber. Closer to the center lies the whiter, finely textured Manila hemp. As the ribbons are cut and pulled away from the stalk, the worker arranges them in orderly fashion to keep the still heavy with moisture material from becoming matted or kinked. Despite the large amount of labor that goes into obtaining it, the fiber content of a stalk amounts on a weight basis to only about 2%. From this fact, we can get an idea of the labor involved in producing only a few pounds of Colombian-marked Manila hemp. This premium product easily is identified by the CRC mark, which is recognized everywhere as offering longer-lasting durability and dependability. The surroundings in which abaca is grown on Mindanao possess great natural beauty, such as marks these slopes with the summit of Mount Apo in the background. This, the highest peak in the Philippines, lies to the south of the city of Davao. Much of the fine quality abaca produced in the region comes from the hills which ring the base of this majestic mountain. When the stripping is finished, the tuxies are made into bundles of 100 and hauled to the stripping shed. The first mechanical processing of the fiber consists in winding the tuxes around a spindle and pulling them through a serrated bladed knife to separate the individual fibers from the pulpy waste material. This is another job demanding skill and dexterity on the part of the worker. In Davao, machines are used for this work. They're operated in batteries off a single shaft. On the farm, a single machine usually is adequate to handle the crop. But in more primitive areas, the whole job is done by hand. It's a real strength-taxing task to pull the fiber through the blade manually. The setting of the knife blade and the number of its serrations determine the fineness of the fiber. In operating these devices, called Hagotan machines, the operator usually has a helper, such as a member of his family, to hand him the tuxes as he works. This worker, too, makes the first rough separation of the fiber as it comes from the machine. A skilled worker, or birador, turns out from 135 to 150 pounds of fiber daily and is paid on an incentive piecework basis. Once the fiber has been put through the stripping machine, it is placed in the open to dry. This curing under the hot sun and cobalt blue of the tropical sky makes for a picture of varicolored beauty. As it sways on the drying lines, the fiber, ranging in color from pure white to deep golden tones, glints as the sun is reflected from its natural sheen. If the fiber has been properly cleaned in the machines, the drying, which usually requires only a day, will leave it completely cured, moisture and rot resistant, and ready for trimming, grading, storage, and export. Since World War II, the Philippines' abaca production, whose control previously was monopolized by Japanese, has been taken over by the Filipinos themselves and is carried on by them from small farm to large plantation scale. The procurement and shipping subsidiary of the Colombian Rope Company in the island, the first to be established there by an American cordage manufacturer, maintains a fleet of trucks which range throughout all reaches of the growing region, picking up abaca directly from growers or, more frequently, from middlemen who operate small stores in outlying barrios. This farmer, moving with his sled cart, his youngsters, and ambling water buffalo along a back road, is typical of the small abaca growers who swell the crops produced by the large plantations. Farmers like this fellow cultivate modest-sized crops of abaca on whatever land they do not have to use to produce food. The sight of bundles of abaca fiber riding on carts like this is a common one. Such small yields usually are hauled into nearby barrios to be sold to middlemen. With its crew riding atop a full load of abaca bundles or botos, this truck has completed its rounds of farms and stores on its route and is bound for the warehouse. This is one of the warehouses maintained by Colombian at Davao, Tacloban, Cebu, and Tabaco in the abaca-producing region. Here the fiber gathered by truck from plantations and farms will be trimmed, graded, baled, and stored to await shipment far overseas to rope manufacturers throughout the world who appreciate and demand only the best CRC-marked Manila hemp. The warehouses or bodegas established by Colombian in the Philippines for the procurement of abaca 40 years ago were taken over by the Japanese during World War II invasion and occupation of the island. Most of them were destroyed in the fierce fighting which ended in the defeat of the Japanese. But agents of the Colombian Rope Company re-entered the islands close behind the victorious forces of General Douglas MacArthur, and their first task was to rebuild the war-shattered bodegas and revive the fiber trade. After they are weighed and checked, the loose bales are carried into the warehouse. While the fiber has been stripped of pulp and dried, it is not yet ready for shipment. Operations to be performed next will be recognized as most important in maintaining the high, uniform quality of each grade of Colombian's world-renowned Manila hemp. As soon as the fiber reaches the warehouse, the company's own supervisory personnel takes over direction of all handling and processing of the material. Now the botos are broken open, the fiber is laid out, and a group of skilled workmen called the tip cutters begins to work upon it. These deft, sharp-eyed men remove the discolored tips from the white fiber and are responsible also for removing any foreign material that may be found clinging to it. As we noted earlier, the color and texture of the fiber varies in the different layers of the stalk. These workers often make another rough separation of the fiber in accordance with its coloring and fineness. When the tip cutters have finished their work, the fiber is moved to another group called the classifiers. These men are top experts in the grading of the fiber. Usually, they will be found to have worked at their jobs for years to acquire the ability to unerringly separate one grade of fiber from another. After it has been trimmed and separated into various grades, the fiber is ready for baling. Because the bultos were broken up during the grading operations, the hanks in each lot must now be weighed to make up the correct amounts which will go into uniform bales. Uniformity of size will make it easier to handle the bales when they are moved into storage or removed for shipment. Uniformity of weight, each bale scaled 278 pounds, makes it possible to determine with reasonable accuracy the rope yield which can be had from any given number of fiber bales. To prevent kinking or other damage to the long fibrous skeins, they are carefully whipped out and arranged in order before going to the baling crew. Since we have seen that so much goes into obtaining relatively small quantities of this fiber, you will understand why no precaution is overlooked in making sure that it suffers no harm in handling and shipment. The form of the bale gradually is built up in a succession of box-like frames which are raised one upon the other as the fiber is put in place by the press gang. We'd like to remind you here that fathers and brothers of many of these sturdy, lithe workers were captured, killed, or scattered to the mountains and hills when the Japanese invaders came. Many of them, too, died in guerrilla fighting against the aggressor before the tide of war changed and the islands finally were liberated. Veteran Colombian workers who managed to survive the war evinced their loyalty to the company by helping its representatives in many ways as the latter tackled the difficult task of rebuilding the shattered abacá warehouse facilities. In the course of these scenes, we shall see how the press gangs bind the bales with slender rope after the fiber has been carefully compressed in the hydraulic baler. The rope used in this operation is made by hand by the Filipinos themselves, after methods that were in use long before the commercial production and export of abacá fiber became an industry of world economic and strategic importance. Rope of various kinds played important roles in man's first groping attempts to harness the forces of nature, to erect buildings and other works that lifted him from the primitive. Man, too, used rope as an aid in transporting his possessions as he made his first explorations and migrations. He hit upon a way of rope hobbling and harnessing the first beasts he subjugated to his uses, and his first ventures upon the trackless seas were risked in flimsy craft whose parts literally were tied together. There is much more to the romance of rope, for there is no substitute for cordage in many activities of our present-day mechanized industry and commerce. Its importance to our very security, as the shortage of abacá fiber demonstrated so convincingly during the last Great War, cannot be overemphasized. No arm of our military establishment could be flexed or deliver a blow without the rope and cordage it needs for myriad purposes. The finished bales now are marked with lot numbers and grade symbols which will determine their placement in the warehouse and make them easily identifiable for shipment. Here, the final weight check is being made on the finished bales before they go into the storage shed. As we pointed out earlier, each one of these bales weighs nearly 300 pounds. We also noted that the fiber obtained from the abacá stalks amounts to only about 2% of the total bulk of the stalk. With those figures in mind, and by taking into consideration all the labor and skills that go into processing of the fiber, we can appreciate the high dollar value which each one of these bales represents, and why pure manila rope is the most costly of natural fiber cordages. Nothing better demonstrates the supple strength, grace, and endurance of the Filipinos than the easy manner in which they handle the heavy, bulky bales and carry them to allotted places in the storage shed. With the weight evenly distributed between them with the carrying pole, the workers trot sure-footedly up and down the narrow plank catwalks which reach like ramps to all levels of the shed. This hard work would quickly exhaust more sedentary men. As you can see, these bales are being stored to await shipment. However, they do not wait too long in storage, as the Colombian Rope Company realizes the great importance placed on color in the marketing of Manila hemp, and therefore would never risk the chance of CRC-marked Manila hemp deteriorating color-wise. Colombian employees are on the alert, constantly rotating and shipping these bales to ensure the buyer the utmost in strength and color is guarantee when the CRC mark is purchased. The Philippines government is fully aware of the importance of the growing and export of abacá to the economy of the nation and takes steps to see to it that all fiber leaving the islands will measure up to standards which have won Manila hemp its uncontested top standing among all of the world's naturally produced rope-making materials. Each morning, a government inspector calls at the Colombian warehouses and examines approximately 5% of the bales pressed the previous day. During this procedure, Colombia's own manager, shown here with the government official, stands by and makes his own inspection. This inspection guarantees that the company's strict, uncompromising quality standards have been rigidly maintained in the processing, grading, and readying for shipment of the fiber. Now the fiber is ready to begin its long journey over thousands of miles of sea and land. As we watch the preliminary steps and see the bales start on their way, let's speculate briefly on some of the uses this fiber will be put to when it has been fashioned into finished rope. It may go to a farm or lumber camp where the resiliency and moisture-resisting qualities of pure Manila rope make it a trustworthy work implement under all weather conditions. Or it may go into industry for use with hoists and power transmission devices, and for scores of other uses where cordage or exceptional strength and durability is demanded. Manila hemp is fashioned into special rope used by tower linemen. Their lives depend upon cordage of qualities which block out moisture absorption and which keep conductivity to a minimum. Intrepid mountain climbers also trust their lives to Manila rope when they pit daring and skill against the hazards of great heights. The gasoline-powered truck hauling these loads are a reminder, too, that Manila fiber rope is vital to the operations of the petroleum industry. These are only a few of the vital usages in which Manila hemp plays so important a role in our everyday lives. When industry calls, Manila hemp is there to meet the challenge, earning for itself a worldwide reputation for its ability to stand up longer under the roughest usage to which any cordage is subjected. At last we have reached the docks at Davao, which usually are found to be as full of activity as any in the island. Here the fiber bale cargoes are loaded onto barges or inter-island vessels plying between the various islands. From here, they will be taken to Manila to be put aboard the big freighters which will carry them on the long sea voyage across the oceans of the world. The piling of these bales of fiber at the docks suggests the truism of the cordage industry, that 90% of all rope goes down to the sea. Yes, from the time the first raft was contrived, and from the era when man first thought of ways to trap, hook, or net the creatures that live in the seas, he has used cordage of various forms and refinements to traffic upon the waters and harvest the life that inhabits them. Merchant fleets, mighty navies, fisheries craft, pleasure yachts, and dumpy tugs all demand rope, and preferably Manila rope, for mooring lines, cargo nets, towing lines and hawsers, seine lines, lifeboat falls, and many other purposes. In watching this cargo of Manila fiber being hoisted aboard ships, we will observe that rope is playing an important part in the operation. While tall, rope-rigged sailing ships today are infrequently encountered upon the sea lanes crisscrossing the world, mariners could not even moor their vessels, much less take on or discharge cargo, without rope. Rope secures the cargoes, too, which are carried above the land and seas in aircraft, and it even fills important functions in the submarines which prowl the undersurface of the ocean. While our story here is concerned mainly with Manila fiber and its great value as a rope component, our viewers should be reminded that the Colombian Rope Company, the world's largest exporter of Manila hemp, also maintains a worldwide sales organization through its system of brokers for the marketing of Manila hemp. In appointing these brokers, Colombian has been uncompromising in the standard requirements each individual broker must uphold. This safeguard ensures the buyer of each purchase of CRC-marked Manila hemp through one of Colombian's worldwide system of brokers that the buyer is dealing with an organization whose experience and integrity are beyond reproach. It guarantees the buyer our adherence to the same unexcelled standard for which Colombian has been known for over half a century. A frequent meeting place for men concerned with all phases of Manila hemp production and export are the Colombian Rope Company of the Philippines offices in Davao. Here, problems affecting the industry, as well as possible means of improving the production and handling of the fiber, are discussed informally by plantation owners, dealers, inspectors, and members of the company's own staff. In other sections of the offices, Filipino youths and men perform the clerical tasks and handle the paperwork which helps keep the abacá procurement activities of the Colombian Rope Company running smoothly. These workers, together with those we have seen in the fields and warehouses, and with the hundreds employed elsewhere in the company's offices and factories, all are part of the team which produces a product demanded everywhere by those who will accept nothing but the finest CRC marked Manila hemp.